Hi, welcome everyone. Thank you for coming. Just give ourselves a minute or so, let people trickle in. Okay, let's go ahead and get started. Just want to let you know that we're recording this meeting and we do have Spanish and Vietnamese interpretation available. So I'm going to play a video, 2 videos that explain the interpretation function. Sorry. All right, thank you. So welcome. Thank you all for making the time to come to this meeting today to talk about the Community Opportunity to Purchase program. We're going to be talking today about where we are in the process and give an overview of the draft framework of a COPA program. That should take about a half an hour, and then we'll have the remaining time today, about 45 minutes, to take questions and gather feedback, and we'll go back through the framework element by element and take your questions. So before we get started, let's just do some introductions. I'm going to introduce myself and then ask my the San Jose staff to introduce themselves. If you wouldn't mind introducing yourself in the chat function and just putting your name and your connection to San Jose and perhaps the organization that you're affiliated with, if you're affiliated with an organization. So my name is Elizabeth Guzman. I'm on the policy team here at the City of San Jose. I'm happy that you all have joined us today. I will turn it over to Kristen.
Hi, Kristen Clements in the Housing Department in the City of San Jose. Thank you so much for coming today.
How about Josh?
Hi, everybody. Thank you for coming. I'm Josh Ishimatsu, also on the housing team, the policy team of the Housing Department for City of San Jose.
And Asen?
Hi, folks. Asen NTI Partnership for the Base Future Fellow in the City of San Jose. Glad to be here and glad to have you.
Thank you. So where we are at in the process. So last September, or excuse me, in September of 2020, the City Council approved a citywide residential anti-displacement strategy, which included direction to explore a COPA program. So since April of this year until October, we've been meeting with stakeholders and going through an extensive community engagement process. We've been meeting with representatives from realtors, brokers, small apartment building owners, property managers, lenders, affordable housing developers, tenant advocates, policy organizations, and community leaders. We've been meeting in several different formats. We've had a technical team that we've met with during this time, as well as a larger, broader stakeholder community team. And then we've also been meeting with stakeholders one-on-one. In all, we've reached about 160 people in over 50 meetings. So right now, at this point, we're in the public review period of our, and have presented our draft framework. And we can drop into the chat a copy of the draft framework from our website. So if you'd like to reference that as we go along in this presentation, you're more than welcome to. In this public review period, we're holding several public meetings. We had one last week today, and then we'll have a few more in January and February after the holidays. And then come spring of 2022, the plan is to head to the Housing Commission and City Council Committee for review, the CEDC, and then to City Council. So today we want to give you all an overview of the proposed program and bring everyone up to the same level of knowledge of this proposal. So we're going to go through a description of the entire program proposal as all of the elements fit together, and then we'll open it up to questions in the second half. If you have a question during this first section, please make a note of it or type it into the Q&A, not the chat, and then we'll answer your question in the second half of the meeting. So first things first, a definition of a COPA is the proposed community opportunity to purchase program gives qualified nonprofit organizations, as we call them QNPs, an opportunity to make the first offer to buy rental residential properties before properties are put on the open market, and the right to make a final offer to match terms and conditions of a third-party bid. This is not, note that this does not require the sale of a building to a QNP. The only requirement under this program would be for the owner who is going to sell their building to go through a prescribed process. The outcome is up to the owner. So we have several reasons we are proposing this program. The purpose of COPA is to prevent displacement and to preserve existing low-cost housing. Properties purchased by a QMP in the COPA program would be preserved as restricted affordable housing to the extent that they qualify for the city's subsidies that keep rents low. COPA would be a way to give tenants opportunity to gain knowledge and participate in the process of their building being sold. Buildings could either continue to be rented or could eventually be converted to home ownership opportunities or other home ownership structures that would promote wealth building. So the framework that we developed is similar to other COPA programs. And what the format we'll follow today is the applicability. So that's the property size and exemptions, a timeline for transactions, the buyers, who in our program would be qualified nonprofits and community partners, income eligibility and targets, and tenant engagement, as well as education and enforcement. And now I'm going to hand it over to Asen, who's going to talk about applicability and timeline.
Hi, everyone. Just a really quick reminder, my name is Asen NDI. I'm the partnership for the Base Future Fellow in the city of San Jose, and have been working on helping to develop this program for the last couple of years. Applicability essentially just means what properties do we think should be included in this program? And part of the reason why we want to make sure we define that is because we want to make it clear what properties this will apply to, not just for the tenants, but also for the property owners. After a really long and considerate community engagement process, staff is going to be recommending including all properties that have at least 2 units. The reason why we're looking at properties that are 2 units or more is that what it means is that it leaves almost 63% of all rental properties that are in the market within the program. It also includes a lot of the folks that we are generally considering as at risk of displacement, folks who are low income and below 80% AMI. But we also understand that, not every case is going to be the same. And so we're including a number of exemptions, including owner-occupied units, properties, up to 4 units. Any family transfers, sort of, especially to direct relatives, would be excluded. And also any sort of transactions that that have special process, like or government transfers, would also not be included. Next slide. Oh, wow. So for the timeline, essentially, I think for folks who are brand new to this program, at its core, what COPA does is that it creates a process so that qualified nonprofits are able to get the first crack at a property when it goes up for sale. And so what that process actually does essentially is just create, I think an efficient process through which the property owner knows what's going on, the qualified nonprofits also know what's going on, and then eventually, of course, the tenants are involved and are able to know what's going on as well. And though I'm not sure everybody is this chart, but basically what it does is that it creates a process in the property owner first notifies a list of qualified nonprofits that they intend to sell. Within a very short period of time, qualified nonprofits are able to make their interest in that property known to the property owner, which then creates a process through which the qualified nonprofit will do some due diligence, do some really quick initial probing, and put together an offer. The property owner is fully in control and is able to accept or reject that offer. If they reject that offer from the qualified nonprofit, they can just go ahead and put it up for sale on the open market. What we ask as part of this program is that they just give the qualified nonprofit the right to make a final offer, to bring back the offer that they were able to secure on the open market, and allow the qualified nonprofit to match that offer. The property owner is still, able to reject even a matching offer from the qualified nonprofit and still sell it to a private party. So, again, I think it's important to remember that the property owner in the end gets to decide who the property goes to, but the process does create opportunities for the qualified nonprofits to be able to purchase them. Next slide. So we also understand that, with market realities, you're most likely going to be looking at 2 different timelines, though some timelines are going to be for smaller properties. And, just thinking about it, smaller properties just trade a lot more quickly because they're cheaper to purchase and most likely don't require as much financing. And so we will try to do as much as possible is try to match or at least be in the ballpark of existing timelines for sales. And so for 2 to 4 properties, we're looking at a timeline that will be overall up to 100 days, but really focusing on sort of that initial 15-day period of statement of interest, 25 days to look at the property, investigate the property, and create an offer, and then giving about 2 months or 60 days to be able to close afterwards. Next slide. So for larger properties, those properties tend to sit a little bit longer on the market, just again, because most likely they require different types of financing and, or just a much larger transaction and obviously have fewer potential buyers, And so because of that, we want to make sure nonprofits, especially the ones who are going to need to be lining up, different types of financing, are able to have the time to be able to do the necessary due diligence, to engage tenants, and to secure, to be able to buy those properties. And so we're matching the same period for that initial step, that statement of interest period, statement of intent period. So that's also 15 days, and that same time period for the offer period. The only real change here is going to be giving an extra 40 days in order to be able to close on the property, because again, because the properties are going to be a lot more expensive, most likely there will be a need for multiple sources of financing. And so they might need a little bit more time to be able to secure that financing. Next slide. Yep, I'll pass it to Josh.
Hi, everybody. Josh Ishimatsu, he and his. Again, I'm the policy manager for the City of San Jose Housing Department. So as Asen discussed, COPA would provide qualified nonprofit organizations or QMPs with an opportunity to submit an offer on applicable properties up for sale. So who are these QMPs? City of San Jose would certify nonprofit organizations to become QMPs. And these nonprofit organizations would have to be certified as a nonprofit under the 501c3 code section of the federal tax code. And because we want to give assurance to sellers that these nonprofits have the ability to complete a transaction, we'd look to certify nonprofits who have the experience to do so, who have a demonstrated track record of purchasing and developing properties. Staff recommends that these criteria be defined as at least 4 total completed projects and 2 completed projects, housing projects, rental housing projects, affordable rental housing projects, I should say, in the past 5 years. And that, that they be similar in scope. So acquisition rehab preferred. We'd also want organizations that have a direct connection and mission to serve San Jose and that have a demonstrated track record with community engagement. For experienced nonprofit developers who do not meet these connection to San Jose and community engagement conditions, they can satisfy these conditions by working with a local nonprofit community partner. Next slide, please. Affordability. Because one of the main goals of COPA, as Elizabeth discussed, is to preserve long-term affordability of housing in San Jose, buildings that are acquired by QNPs through the COPA program would have to become coveted affordable housing. For rental properties, income limits would be set at 30 to 80% AMI, this is technical houser terminology, but that basically translates to $49,700 a year in income to $117,750 in income for a family of 4. For properties which are converted from rental to ownership, the applicable income range would be 60 to 100% AMI, which for the same hypothetical family of 4 translates to $99,400 approximately to $181,500 for that family of 4. Staff recommends also that the city establishes an overall portfolio goal. So all the properties that would be acquired by QMPs and supported by the city, when taken together, would have an average affordability of 50% AMI, which translates to $82,850 for a family of 4. Also, because another main goal of COPA is anti-displacement, we would have as a fundamental principle that no existing resident of a building that would be purchased by a QMP under COPA should be displaced because of these affordability requirements. Therefore, existing tenants who are under income would pay either their current lease rents or the affordable rent based upon their current income, whichever is lower. And current tenants who are over income would pay either their current lease rents or the affordable rent based upon their current income, whichever is higher. And I will pass the mic to Kristen.
Thanks. So when we think about tenant engagement, one of the benefits of this kind of program, the community opportunity to purchase, is that tenants can become more knowledgeable about the people or the companies that are buying their buildings. Tenant engagement is really important when we're talking about preservation of existing buildings. And if anyone's been a renter and has lived through somebody buying your building, which I have many times, it is incredibly stressful. And so what we're aiming for in this program is to have the qualified nonprofit and or the community partner they're working with promise that they will demonstrate efforts to engage tenants during the property acquisition, before the property acquisition, during the property acquisition, after the property acquisition. And really the purpose of this is to educate them about what COPA is and is not, what affordable housing would entail, what is restricted affordable housing, who is the company that would be coming in and what would their objective be, what is their mission. And so really the goal would be to help reduce some stress and to get people used to the idea that restricted affordable housing requires people to give income information. And why is that? It's because rents need to be right-sized so that people pay 30% of their incomes for rents plus a utility allowance. It's to their benefit, but a lot of people may not know that up front, and so they're very hesitant to talk to the new folks who might be purchasing the building. And so one of the qualifications of the QNP and the community partner would be they would have to promise to engage the tenants productively, but still strike a balance of being respectful that, before the transaction goes through, they do not own the building. They would need to communicate productively with the current building owner and, and respect those boundaries and kind of strike a balance. Next slide. So finally, outreach and education. And thank you for bearing with us as we try to get through this whole description to try to get those people who might not be aware of this program yet. We wanted to get through the whole description and then open it up for Q&A after this. This is the last descriptive slide. So you're doing well, you're hanging in there, and we're almost through this piece. So really the question is now, what is this program? How is it going to be administered? And how do we educate the public about it? And then how will it be enforced? How will it be administered? So first, the idea about COPA, it is about buildings up for sale. And we know that a property owner may only own one building. And really for a successful program, the most important thing is that we would have to educate the public widely about what the program's about and to try to get everyone well aware of what the process that would be required would be. It doesn't do any good if somebody is, they put their building on the market, they're not aware of the procedures, and then they run afoul of the program because they didn't know. That is not optimal in anyone's mind. And so really, we've been talking a lot about outreach and education, and we'd be looking to lots of stakeholder groups in the community, if the city council wanted to move forward with this, that we would team with over the next months, up to a year before the program took effect, so that we could do a widespread community education effort. So once the program was in effect, how would it be administered and how would it be so we see this as a very lightly staffed program. And so when that is the case, because the money has to come from somewhere in order to pay for city staff, when a program is lightly staffed, usually what that means is that if, for instance, a building is put on the market out there and somebody thinks that perhaps it wasn't, the proper process was not followed, they could call into the city and say, you know, you may want to call the owner of such and such address and or just issue them a letter or something. So the focus would be on education first and foremost, but it would be on a complaints basis because we wouldn't have enough staff to go, you know, following the many, many listings that are out there and be proactive about that. Like other programs that we have administrative enforcement as a framework. And so the idea is that if somebody didn't do something quite correctly, they would receive a letter, a written letter saying, not sure you're aware, but there's an ordinance and that it would tell you to do things this way. And we're not sure that you did it quite correctly. The emphasis is on enforcement and just saying, if you were to do this again, you would know to do it differently, and please call us if you have any questions. The second time, after being informed that somebody would not do it correctly, they could be subject to fines and starting at low levels. And then if it became apparent that someone had been informed and it was obvious that they had received the rules and were intentionally flouting the rules, then there would be a scaled up fine schedule. The city runs lots of programs like this. We would look to conform with the fine schedule that's defined in an annual fees schedule that the city council approves every year. And then the last bullet, the idea of a private right of action, again, goes kind of hand in hand with a lightly staffed program. It is possible that somebody would say, you know, my building sold properly, and this is the 5th building that this property owner sold. I think there's a pattern of practice here, and bring that case to a nonprofit law firm. And the nonprofit law firm could decide, is that a strong case? Would they want to try to help bring an action? But this is kind of in standard legal land as to whether a case would be strong or not strong. This is not a COPA specific issue. This is just, is there somebody knowingly violating something out there that is obvious that they knew better? Is the case a good case or not? So anyway, there could be third parties that would be able to bring an action under the ordinance, just like other city ordinances that are out there. So we'd be looking to be consistent with other city ordinances. But bottom line is, we would like the program to achieve its outcomes. And that is all about education and partnership and talking to people and trying to get this program to result in some restricted affordable housing to stabilize residents in danger of displacement. That is the goal. Next slide. Thank you.
Thanks, Kristen. Looks like we're right on time. So we have plenty of time now for questions. Again, if you have a question, if you could put it into the Q&A box, we can answer it there, or you can raise your hand. I do see that Martha and David have their hands up, so I will be calling on you first. We're just going to go again element by element. So we'll go here to applicability, and Jason is going to give just a one-sentence summary of it, and then we'll take questions. So if you can, keep your questions to the the element that we're on. We understand that's not always possible, but just do know that we're going to work through this element by element. So Jason, if you could just give a brief summary.
Yeah, sure. Again, it's just all of the properties that are going to be included in the program and who are going to have to go through the COPA process when they go up for sale.
Thank you. Okay, so Martha, I'll go ahead and unmute you, and you are able to speak your question.
Okay, well, I don't know that it belongs in this paragraph here. So can I just
Sure.
ask
Yes.
a question and make a comment?
Mm-hmm.
I got an email from somebody that I've known for 40 years, and he told me something that no one else has told me, and I've never heard it, but I trust him. and I'm bringing this to Housing's attention. He says that the renters are afraid to come to these webinars because they fear retaliation from the landlords. I cannot speak to the truth of that, but I'm just throwing it out there to folks like Kristen. Maybe you guys can find out. Okay, my two questions, they're real fast. Why have you disabled the ability of us to see the chat? Why are you not allowing me to see David's comments and David to see mine? Why did you do that?
Oh, we just are asking people to put their questions into the Q&A function. It's
That's
just
not my, no, that's not my question. We've been allowed to do that before. Why have you disabled that function?
I think we've disabled the function so that we can kind of keep it a bit more orderly in terms of the question and answer. So if you do put a question.
Okay, I'll be writing a letter because this is all about spin and control. You're not allowing us to interact with each other, and that is wrong. Okay, my question is, I am really up in the air about this. I have not made up my mind on COPA. I keep going back and forth and back and forth. But my main, and that you asked for comments too, not just a question. I'm real concerned about the government fining people. Okay, they're already interfering with the sale of property. And like I say, I haven't made up my mind if that's good or bad. Okay, honest to God, I have not. But when you're talking about fining people for not doing this in the United States of America, I get real nervous. So is there any possibility that you can take that element of a fine out?
I can address that. Hi, Martha. I
Hi,
think.
Kristen.
Hello. I'm glad you're here. Thank you for coming. I think it's the idea of an ordinance that has no penalties at all probably is an example of an ordinance that it's not worth the time to put in place. Small fines are a much better enforcement mechanism, we think, than, for instance, like to enforce state law, somebody has to bring a lawsuit, which is just such a high barrier. It's so kind of nonsensical for the most part, right? That very few people would ever bring a lawsuit. There's a very high cost for that. Whereas a very small fine could get somebody's attention, but yet it wouldn't be burdensome. And so that's why fines are used for enforcement, that especially small ones can be gradual. So it's like a parking ticket is an example of a program that uses fines, because if someone says, just please don't stay here all day long, folks would be like, thanks, but I will anyway, so anyway, I think they're commonly used.
Thank you. Thanks for your question, Martha. Next, I see that David has his hand up. I'll go ahead and unmute you, David. David, looks like you're on mute.
Thank you, Elizabeth. I guess really what strikes me as being kind of hard to bite is that COPA's program doesn't produce one additional housing unit, not one. How do you justify the huge expenditures? Has anyone asked themselves the question? When the problem is we are in a housing crisis and we're not building, why then do we eat and skin the existing housing? Why? It's a simple one-on-one. You take away from one set of tenants and you give it to another set, but you don't make one additional unit. Why is that? Has anybody thought about that?
Yeah, if I could say something about preservation. Hi, David. How are you?
Good.
Hi.
Can you,
And then I think Asen also wanted to chime in.
Yeah.
You are right. This is preservation and it's not production. And one of the basic ideas for anti-displacement work is that you can't do all one thing or another. And so, for instance, you can't just focus on tenant rights if you're not producing enough of housing in general, producing affordable housing. You can't only preserve units if you're not building enough units. That people talk about this as a three-legged stool. And really, I think of it in a way that because the housing market is so imperfect, that we have so underbuilt compared to demand, and that people are so, it's so pricey compared to what people can afford, that there's no way that you can get away with just producing. So the idea that you can just produce your way out of affordability problems or supply problems or different types of housing being scarce in different places, it's just not true, because the market's not perfect and because we're so underbuilt. And so because that's the case, you need to keep the reasonably cost housing that you've got, but then right size the rents. And you can't right size the rents except through infusion of city subsidy, because residents are commonly paying 50% of their income on rent, 60% more. They're doubled up, they're tripled up. We have a terrible problem here. So that's why it's not production, but it complements production. And then the tenant protection programs complement both of those things, because people need to feel like they are not going to, like they have rights where they are. And so they will not be optionless. You know, they'll be protected where they are, because they don't have a lot of options to move into all kinds of different places for their.
I understand that, Kristen. Thank you very much. That seems plausible.
Thank you.
However, in the official papers that you brought out, it is anticipated that you take 1,000 properties a year. That's your aim, 1,000 properties a year. And how bad is our program? Why is it that we can't build in those areas that were settled for the villages close to the transportation? Why is that? We're stuck in the water and we're playing around cannibalizing existing housing. But I'll let that go. However, I want some kind of an answer to that in writing. Now, for the first time, unless I'm wrong, for the first time, you are recording this, and this will be available to the public, will it not? Will this specific question? Yeah.
That's the plan.
Okay.
Is to, if all goes well and we have an orderly meeting, and we can post this to the website afterwards.
An orderly meeting. Can you see me? Can you?
No, I could see
right?
just your initial.
Oh, okay. All right, Kristen. Fine. Thank you. May I
just want
have
to clarify.
one more question?
Well, I just
Yeah,
want to
I think
clarify
Asen
one
wanted to
thing
clarify, was that the 1,000 unit
Yeah,
figure?
just want to make it clear. The 1,000 units per year is a goal of the city of San Francisco's, or city and county of San Francisco's housing department. That is their goal in the future. Currently, they're averaging between 100 and 150 per year preserved. And again, so it's a goal. And then I will also just mention that the city has a 2,000 per year affordable housing production goal under the mayor's 25,000 overall units plan. And I think one of the things that we're trying to address is actually the loss of the existing naturally occurring affordable housing.
Thank you, Asen.
Oh, okay.
Kristen, did you want to respond?
I wanted to say that that's what I thought as well, where the 1,000 number came from, was from San Francisco's goal, and that we have not yet set a program goal because we, under COPA, because that's really more a function of the preservation funding that we as a city would have to make available, and that's still to be determined.
Okay.
Thank
So-
you.
Thank you.
David, we have several people with their hands up, so I'm wondering if we could get to the next speaker. Thank you. I think we have Paul, and then after Paul, we'll hear from Sandy. So Paul Soto, if you could go ahead and speak your question. I think you'll have to unmute yourself, Paul.
Oh, okay. All right. Got it. Thank you. Paul Soto from the Horseshoe. Thank you, Martha, for your advocacy. You're picking up on the little pieces that is very common in these meetings in terms of like information blockage. I think you said it correctly with respect to we're not going to build our way out. And so that needs to be talked about because they have marketers and consultants that feed Locardo and the rest of the dice. They feed them marketing information. Continue to frame it in this way. Don't allow yourself to be challenged. Keep on message, keep on message. And what that message has been is that we're in a housing shortage. God, there's a housing shortage. We're just short of housing. And that's not true because we have 400,000 people that are coming to this city and they're incrementally being inserted into the context of this city that are not from here, have absolutely no connection to the area. They're just strangers, they're rich strangers. And those rich strangers are going to accelerate between now and 2035. So I think it's incumbent upon you to notify the public and start challenging the messaging that is coming from the dice, because we're being told it's a housing shortage. That's a lie. We know that it's a lie. You know that it's a lie. And so to silence sometimes becomes betrayal. And so I don't really have a question other than why has your moral and ethical responsibility to the citizens of the city not been picked enough to where you would challenge somebody that has authority? This closed kind of bureaucracy that exists within the city, it's going to kill people. People are literally going to die because of people's silence and fear of challenging somebody. And now they're the office pariah and they don't want to deal with that. So they just go along to get along. And as you're doing that, people are dying. So that's pretty much what I have to say with respect to this topic.
Thank you, Paul.
Thank you, Paul. And I'm glad you're here today. And I wanted to respond. The housing, two things. The housing market, it has lots of different prices and lots of different products, right? And we know that the new housing that's being built is very, very expensive compared to the older housing that's in the market. And so, and we also know that the whole state has not built enough housing for its residents, and San Jose has gained residents. They are newer. They're still our residents. They're not longtime residents like you are, but they still live here. And so the whole state has underbuilt. I think it was 3+ million underbuilt, 3+ million housing units over the last decade or so. And so, you know, some types are easier to build than others. And we know low cost is very hard to build. It takes subsidy to build it. And so, or to preserve it. And so we're doing as best we can to try to get preservation part of that conversation, along with building market rate units, building restricted affordable. This is one of the other things we have to make progress on. And we appreciate your constant focus on folks who have lived here for generations and the needs of the community, because we have been listening and trying our best to answer those needs for years now. And it may not look like it to the outside world, but the groups that is represented here is very wedded to those goals and objectives. So thank you for being here.
Yes, just one piece of information to kind of help you along to bolster your position in your advocacy on our behalf. From 2016, which was when the non-disclosure agreement was signed by Perales, Liccardo, and Carrasco, from 2016 till today, right now, today, the threshold of 25% has never been broken for affordable housing, meaning from those years, it never went above 25%. It has stayed within that range to 0 to 25. Now, at the same time, 2016 till today, the market rate of market rate housing goals have been met 95% to 115% of the time during that time. The same time period, those numbers have remained constant. You're not going to have that in a market like this. So that means that that's by design. That was actually by design. That's number one. Number two is that with that said, why is there not a moratorium considered with respect to that market rate housing that puts a cap on that until you bring up the affordable housing volume until it reaches 50%. Then once it reaches 50% and people can stabilize, then you can go ahead and build. Other than that, you put a cap on it. That's the only way that we're going to be able to survive.
Taking your comment down about the moratorium and your RENA goals tracking. Thank you for that.
Thanks, Paul. Next, we'll hear from Sandy and then Tim. Sandy, if you go ahead and speak your question.
Thanks. I just wanted to throw in my 2 cents against the answer. First of all, what David said, and then address what Paul just said. But I think the object of COPA is actually, while it's not to produce new units, it's to prevent existing units from becoming unaffordable. Because one of the problems when people go to sell their property, I think people are aware there's a lot of corporate forces out there which are coming in with cash, and a lot of speculators who want to buy up these properties and do a little renovation and then either flip them and sell them themselves for a much higher rate, or else just raise the rents. So even though it doesn't add units, it prevents units from being subtracted, which is what the situation is that's going on now. And then in regard to what Paul said, I mean, we're dealing with we've got the housing system in America is really problematic. And if you look around and look at the rents and the severe rent burdens, especially in a place like California, and the homelessness, you can see the housing system is not working the way it's supposed to. And so part of the innovation that's involved with COPA is it gives an opportunity for to set up a model for a different way of organizing the housing system, instead of having housing. Because right now, frankly, for most housing in San Jose, housing serves more of an investment than as a place to live. And the idea of COPA is to allow either, in our opinion, we think tenants should be empowered to buy the housing themselves. And if they choose to have a qualified nonprofit buy it, but to have the housing be bought by people that will make it permanently affordable, that will, as the criteria says here, they'll be mission focused, so they will not be in it in order to make a big profit or like a speculator, but they'll be in it to provide housing for people to live in. And I think that's the good side of COPA, the good thing that it will do, and it will set up a model for a better housing system than the one that we have. Thank you.
Thank you, Sandy. Okay, next we'll hear from Tim and then Jill. Tim, I'm unmuting you.
Thank you, everybody. I believe that the main intent of this program is how can we increase affordable housing opportunities in the city of San Jose through the acquisition of market rates, since we've already, shown that this isn't producing any new units. Was there any reasoning then for not excluding units that are already under the apartment rent ordinance and tenant protections, because they're already pretty well protected, and the nonprofit should probably be focusing more on trying to purchase market rate units to create a deeper level of affordability, and an ARO to a deed restricted kind of seems like a 1-for-1 swap. So what was the reasoning for including those and not excluding it from the program?
I can comment on that, Tim. That's a good question. And we've thought about this because the rent stabilization program here does add value because the rents are capped, their escalation of the rents are capped. And yet, because of Costa-Hawkins, when somebody moves out of a unit in a rent stabilized building, the new person moving in, that rent gets reset to whatever the owner deems a market rate rent is. And so rents can jump up for that new person. It's not the same because the buildings are older. It's not the same as a new, a brand new building, but it is still, it's not ongoing affordability. So it's not, we think that restricted affordable housing is, as Jackie, our director, says, the gold standard. And then the other idea within the program is that one condition of a city loan could be that we match that rent escalation cap that our apartment rent ordinance has, so that residents would experience that same protection of rents not going up any more than 5% a year, if that's what the current ARO apartment rent ordinance says. And so we would bring in that positive benefit of the rent stabilization. One more thing, which is just some older buildings do need rehabilitation, and that's something that the city's subsidy can come in and help with. It is hard to make it feasible, whether it's privately owned, whether it's owned by a nonprofit with city subsidy. Everybody understands it is hard to rehabilitate older buildings and make that pencil. And so it does take intentionality about that, but that is something else that the city subsidy can help with. So to help solve condition problems. So those are our thoughts around that. It is a good policy discussion.
Thank you. I have another question, but if there's other people's hands raised, you can go to them, and I'll put myself back in the rotation. I don't want to monopolize the time.
Thanks, Tim. Okay, next we'll hear from Jill and then Dixie. Jill, I'm unmuting you.
Thank you. I have a couple of quick little questions and then maybe one big question. So you're saying a family of 4, you gave the parameters of the income limits. If you come upon a property, let's say it's really successful and the landlord's agreeable, you've got this great nonprofit that buys it. Let's assume it's a great situation. In the event that that person's just over the limit, they will be evicted by you, told that they need to leave by the nonprofit. Who's responsible for letting them know that they will not be able to live there anymore? And in effect, we're displacing them. So how does that work out?
Josh, did you want to answer that question?
Somebody who's over income as an existing tenant in a COPA purchase, a COPA property that would be purchased by QMP would not have to be displaced.
Oh, okay.
So that's one of the things that we actually heard from everybody, from tenant advocates and from property owners, was that, like, if you're saying this is This is purpose of the program is to prevent displacement. Existing tenants should not be displaced. So
Okay, but
we,
then I'm sorry not to cut you off, but then the nonprofit is their landlord then at that point, and they own the
yes,
property.
they would have a new landlord, but they would still potentially, I mean, they would have a new landlord, but they would not have to leave the.
Okay, can I ask someone mentioned, okay, that maybe there's 6 or 7 people living in one property or whatnot. Maybe there's 3 different heads of households in that property, a roommate situation, something like that. Have the details been worked out on those kinds of situations?
The specific details for every single situation have not been worked out, but the general proposition, the underlying, thing that will be making policy from will be that current residents should not be displaced.
Okay, and then the question I have is, the nonprofits that are going to be the landlords, if that nonprofit goes out of business, they're not interested in being landlords anymore, will they sell it? I'm assuming sell it to another nonprofit.
If a nonprofit owns a property, I mean, the simple answer is if a nonprofit tries to sell, wants to sell its property, COPA would still apply for a nonprofit owner just as it would for any other owner. So,
Okay.
COPA would apply to their sale of the property. And the more an additional point to that, which is more nuanced, it also depends a little bit on what financing the nonprofit may have gotten to acquire and rehab the property, and there may be public funding available, and they may have certain requirements which run with the land to maintain the property as affordable. So the property would still be subject to whatever existing obligations there are on the property.
Can I ask one final question?
Sure.
Okay, so let's say you have some great tenants. It's not owned by the nonprofit. The tenants give you their lease is up. They leave. Let's say that property is a very valuable duplex in terms of the land value, that it could be sold and redeveloped under SB 9. Have we considered that would actually then be what one of the earlier callers mentioned? We're not actually making anything, we're not producing anything. Could those nonprofits then, knowing they're not evicting anybody, under SB 9, they do own the property, can they then turn that duplex into 4, creating 2 more housing opportunities if they can get financing?
I think that's a very interesting question and interesting scenario. I think, like I said, one of the fundamental principles is that people should not be displaced. If they can do that without displacing existing residents, I don't see why not. Of course, everything about they'd have to be able to get financing, have to be legal, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But I don't see why they wouldn't be able to add units.
If I could add to that, and then I think we need to move on for people. The behind COPA is the process by which folks would be able to make offers. Behind this system would be funders who would make dollars available for affordable housing acquisition and then permanent financing. And the city would be one of those funders. And I think the question that you're asking about, is there a duplex that is valuable and could be changed, could be densified? It just brings up one point, which is that the city's objectives about which buildings that they would fund in which locations would be deliberate. And so, for instance, if there were a duplex that was on a site that was basically right next to a high rise or could be turned into a high rise, that's not a property that I would be interested in subsidizing to remain very tiny, right? Because somebody could come and make an offer like that is not that's not an example of a good preservation property, because a good preservation property would be provide a buffer between a higher density area and a lower density area. And so we would think through in different neighborhoods what that looked like and try to be intentional about that. So hopefully that helps.
Thanks, Kristen, and thank you for your questions, Jill. Next, we'll hear from Dixie. Dixie, are you there? I think you have to unmute yourself.
Yeah, I am. Thanks so much. Hey, I'm Dixie Baus with Eden Housing. Thank you so much to the City of San Jose and all of the staff people for their extraordinary work on this policy. It is a policy that we at Eden Housing absolutely applaud. We look forward to participating as a nonprofit development, affordable housing developer. A couple of things that I'd like to just note, and that is going on our the last train of thought, Kristen, that you brought up, and that is coming up with a good set of objective parameters around defining what and identifying what a good acquisition opportunity, I would say, is going to have to be vital. Otherwise, I fear that we could tread into some unintentional consequences of perpetuating not investing dollars in neighborhoods that might be
sure.
The second thing I'd like to bring up is also some sort of oversight mechanism as it relates to the potential for price setting and fraud by not real good players out there who bid up, if you will, non-bona fide offers. Certainly the development community could put their heads together on this, but in listening very intently to a previous commenter about we're not producing additional units, we might not be producing additional units, but I can tell you that the average price right now picking up 1 unit of multifamily in San Jose is well north of $450,000 a door. But to produce a new housing unit in the city of San Jose, we are spending close to $700,000, $800,000 a door if they are affordable. So we are, in fact, in a sense, picking up a 2-to-1 property if you look at it from a cost perspective. The final point that I'd like to make is having some mechanism within the COPA strategy and policy that continues on Jill's line of thought, which I think is actually brilliant, and that is the potential intensification on a certain parcel of land. So a lot of these smaller parcels of land are fairly low density, I would say. Newer construction methods, certainly in more urban areas, allow for intensification of density in the right locations, if you will, especially when there are infrastructure and services there. And I would think that trying to put a percentage as a definition, say, if you're going to increase, this is just for food for thought, you guys can think about how you'd like to see this, if you want to see this at all. But if you can intensify the site by 25%, that could be a good play going down, because how these acquisition opportunities end up playing out in the field is that those of us who are picking up buildings to preserve existing naturally occurring affordable housing opportunities and also coupling it with intensification with some other financing strategies shortly thereafter is really taking a little bit of the sting out of the bite, if you will. We're not doing it at a great level, but we are doing it at another level. And then finally, one more point. I really apologize for this, but if we have a 4-unit or a smaller unit rental housing, not missing that opportunity to create affordable homeownership opportunities by putting those into condos, to create more opportunities for those who are ready for homeownership but are simply priced out of the market. Those are my comments. Thank you so much for allowing us to be present, be active in this discussion. And again, congratulations and thank you so much for your hard work.
Thank you for coming, Dixie. Always good to hear your ideas. Thank you.
Do you want to go, Kristen? Should I go? Should I address some of Dixie's points? So starting with your last point, Dixie, homeownership. Yes, great idea. And we do think that like some of the smaller properties that could be acquired through COPA might be able to support affordable homeownership. Different products include, different alternatives, including potentially, cooperative or limited equity co-op models. I think, your suggestions about having criteria for what makes a good property to acquire, that is something we're thinking about at the city level as well. Likely that will not be a part of the ordinance. The ordinance, we want something that's broadly applicable to all different types of properties. But with our city funding, we'd probably build in sort of incentives into the application process, incentives into scoring to encourage certain types of properties. Intensification. Like I said earlier, we and like as you mentioned, we don't want any displacement to happen because of that, but intensification seems like a good idea, and that also can be something that's provided with an incentive through a funding application process, the NOFA process, and finally fraud. Yes, that's obviously a concern. We'd want to assure that these are arm's length transactions, that there's a good appraisal to back up any purchase price.
Thanks, Josh. Kristen, did you have anything you wanted to add?
No, I'm fine. Thank you.
Thank you. Before we get to the next speaker, I just wanted to ask John Marienthal, you had put a question into the Q&A that can't quite understand. I'm wondering if you would want to speak out your question so I can ask you to unmute yourself, and if you're there and want to ask your question, please do.
Yes, thank you. I'm John Marienthal. I work with the Affordable Housing Network. My question is essentially, the one that I asked is, this is a meeting to get feedback, but it would be useful for us if people that are speaking could identify if they own like 5 units, 10 units, 100 units. So we have an idea of something of people's perspective of where they're coming from when they're addressing the questions. So far, I don't think it's been an issue because many of the people who have spoken represent different nonprofit or community organizations. But that was a possibility, and that would have to be entirely voluntary. I just posted a second question in the chat in terms of financing. The state of California is on the verge of authorizing a public bank, state level, and there is a possibility for the city of San Jose that has a $2 billion budget that we could look at a possibility of the city creating its own bank, one function of which might be to authorize loans for low-income housing. So that's not exactly your department, but it's an alternative idea to assist in financing.
Actually, if I could address that, John, we actually do make loans for low-income housing That's one of the housing department's functions to developers. And so you hit it right on the nail right on the head. So, and if anybody would like to address John's first question, if there are, I think Dixie just had to depart. I could put, maybe we could put Eden Housing's, could find their website so people could learn more about them and the size of their portfolio, if you'd like to know. But if anyone else is representing a developer who is in the audience, if you'd like to share any answers to John's question, feel free to. In the, I don't know, is the chat open now, Elizabeth? I think Dixie just used it.
The chat, you can,
She gave you the info, actually.
I think that just went to just the host and panelists, so we'll have.
Oh, okay. Eden Housing has 165 properties, 12,000 units. It's, I think it just hit an anniversary. It's one of the oldest, most well-established nonprofit affordable developers in the Bay Area and in California. It's a very large portfolio. Thank you, Dixie.
Thank you. Next, we have Ruth, who has her hand up, and then we'll go back to the start of the queue with David. So Ruth, I'll go ahead and unmute you.
Yes, good afternoon. My name is Ruth Callahan. And first I have to say that the first question is, what is preventing a qualified NP to not do this without an ordinance? Anyone can put a bid in on a piece of property in a free society. So why would we have to go through this process when A, it's not necessary, B, it slows down the selling of the property to the seller, the private property owner. 3, it allows a very unusual process of, after all the bids are in, one bidder has a special allowance to see the last highest bid and then hold up the sale for 30 days while they try to match it or increase it. This is not fair to other buyers. There is no reason for this. There is a free society here. We are allowed to sell our property to whom we want to. We have the ability to put a rent on that property based upon the return of investment on what we have paid for it. Rent control, rent stabilization, special dispensations for certain buyers is highly unusual and usually found only in societies that have a socialistic government. There is no reason to do this. This is completely un-American. And having lived in very large urban cities in my lifetime that have rent control, it produces one thing: tenements, rundown properties, absentee ownership. And then I hear you're going to create a special enforcement, a special kind of fine for someone who doesn't fit into this. This is never going to fly in a free society. What you're doing is communistic, and someone has to stop the housing department from destroying personal property rights for single-family homeowners, for apartment owners, for anyone in this city that owns property. They should be able to sell it to whom they want for whatever price they want and not be subject to any kind of a fine because they didn't sell it to the person that special people in the city government have decided are the only ones that should be eligible to buy it. I would like you to explain that to me.
If I could just make one comment, and then I think Josh and or Asen would like to join in on that. The housing department is not dictating to whom anyone would sell their property. And so we do not believe we are infringing on anybody's property rights. This is not an issue of a taking of anyone's property or a dictating of what you would do with your property. And so we kindly disagree with your reading, but we've taken down your comment about that. And the second thing I'll say is that there are cities and states across the country who have recognized, or that have recognized, that the somewhat unfettered free economy is not serving residents well. And in fact, in general, the economy is functions best when there are regulations on it. And so there is no unfettered, unregulated economy that exists in the United States or anywhere in the world, really. And so the question really is, what is the public policy goal and what are individual rights and what is the balance between them? And so what is being proposed is an opportunity for private owners who choose to sell property of their own volition for a price that they would themselves determine is acceptable, if they would listen to an offer before, which would be in a process that would be universal with some carve-outs through our market, so that no one type of owner would be disadvantaged, that the public policy benefit of this is warranted, and that the intervention in the market is achieving a laudable public policy purpose of not displacing existing residents. And so we actually had to come up with the findings for our attorney to be comfortable with what we are working on. And so the findings are the harms done to not only individuals in the society when they are destabilized and priced out of our market, when they have health effects that are negative because they are displaced, when they need to live in overcrowded conditions, which exposes them to health problems, as we saw very clearly in COVID, when there are problems that the neighborhoods experience because the neighborhoods are overcrowded because housing prices are too high. There's a plethora of damage done not just to those individuals, but to the community when housing is not at the right price point and there's not enough of it. And so when there's a scarcity of affordable housing, that the reasonable accommodation through a public policy program that is accommodating market timing is justifiable. So that is what we're working on. It's not to ruin anybody's opportunities to sell their property for whatever they want to whomever they'd like. So we understand not everyone is going to be a fan of this idea, and that's fine. And we've taken down your comments, but we just wanted to offer some reasons why we're working on this. It's because there needs to be, that the city needs to take a balanced approach to the people that we serve. And the people we serve are those who own property. The people we serve are the businesses here. The people we serve are the renters here. And those who are suffering terribly through this difficult period of COVID that we've all been going through, and are having to leave our community, frankly, to everyone's detriment as we lose culture and as we lose the people who make San Jose what San Jose is. So that is why we're working on this. And this is why we have been working fervently on anti-displacement strategies for the last 2.5 years, listening to the saddest stories in the world for 2.5 years. So I don't know if Josh or Asen want to add anything.
I think you answered, I think, of a lot of it. I just was gonna quickly reiterate 3 quick, very important reasons why this program is needed. One is transparency. I think we've talked a little bit about sort of making sure that opportunities for nonprofits to be able to purchase these properties on the open market are currently really difficult because not all properties are being listed on the open market. Second is timing. We know that there are a lot of outside dollars and investors who are able to purchase properties all cash. This creates a process that really sort of gives nonprofits the time and the opportunity and the support to be able to purchase properties and preserve housing that protects low-income residents. And then lastly, speculation. We are seeing, obviously, in many cases, that the impact of property selling has been really, really negative on existing residents. And this helps at least create an intervention in that process of speculation and helps keep people at home. Other than that, I think, Kristen really wrapped it up well. Thank you.
Asen.
Sorry,
John.
just to add one thing too, the final offer that the nonprofit gets to make, there's a 10-day period, not a 30-day period, as currently proposed.
Thank you. Just going to do a quick chime check. It's 4:23 with about 7 more minutes. We have 2 people with their hand raised, and we have a few more questions in the chat that the Q&A that we'll try to get to as we close out the session. I just want to thank everybody for their questions and for your patience. And yeah, thank you. So let's hear from Sandy.
Do you have to unmute me?
No, you're good.
Oh,
for some reason you were already unmuted.
Okay. Yeah, I just wanted to respond a little bit to Ruth, because actually what my understanding of what COPA will do, it will actually, it's not an assault on property rights. It will actually expand property rights by giving tenants a possible opportunity to buy their unit. And so right now in the state of California, only 23% of California households can afford to buy a home. And this would expand that and allow it to allow more people to possibly own their units. So I just wanted to make that point. And we are, I think, I appreciate actually the housing department for bringing this proposal forward and opening up this debate, because we need it. I think it's time that people realize that we have just a horrible housing crisis in this valley and horrible suffering that's happening. And we have the ability to change that through intelligent policy. And I think this is a step in the right direction. Thank you.
Thank you, Sandy. Next, let's hear
Thank you.
from Martha. Did you want to respond, Kristen?
Elizabeth, no, I thank you, Sandy. No, I actually just wanted to call your attention to several questions in the chat that have been there for a while. So I didn't want to ignore those and just go to the hands raised. I wanted to clear this backlog. And if I could just start with there's several comments from Martha and from others about the process that we're going through here. So I know you may disagree. We have, like with commission meetings, Martha, but for different reasons, we're not Brown Acted here, but we have elected to not have the chat open because we have experienced in other meetings that there has been a lot of side chatter going on, and it has been, frankly, distracting from the Q&A where we're trying to share facts. And so in other meetings that we've there have been folks who have been saying their version of what they thought the facts were in the chat. And we found that it was very confusing because people they weren't hearing us and they were looking at the other thing, and then they end up confused. And so that's what we are trying to avoid today. So that's why we've closed the chat. If anyone would like a list of the people who attended today, we're happy to give you that after the meeting. And just email us. I will put my email address in the Q&A. Anyone's happy, feel free to email and ask for that. We're happy to send it to you. So if that's okay with you, I'm gonna close out those questions about please open the chat, unless Martha would like to comment.
Martha, I think you're unmuted.
Oh, am I
if you want.
unmuted?
Yeah.
Okay, I would like a list of everybody who's here. Is there going to be a way to contact these folks, or just a list of names? Hello?
I'm thinking through that question. It's not something that we typically do. Is if we had the emails of private citizens who came to our meetings, it's not something we would typically give out.
Okay.
For
Ruth,
privacy reasons, I'd have
Ruth-
to think through that.
Ruth, I put my email in the chat. I'd like to talk to you. And I'm really, commission meetings, we disable they disable the chat because it's a Brown Act violation. Like I said, I can multitask. I don't need housing telling me that I can't do that. And you're closing down the chat and you're not letting us communicate. And I think it's having a negative impact. You're separating us, you're dividing us. So I will be asking for the list of names, but of course the list is useless if there's no contact information. You can give everybody that requests the list, Kristen, you can give them my email address. So I consent to that. Okay. And
sure, if anybody, I'm happy to convey that because you've given me that opportunity. I'm happy to give everybody your private, your not private, but the
Homeowners for Equity.
Homeowners for Equity. Absolutely.
Thank you very much. Talk
Absolutely.
to you, Ruth, hopefully soon.
Thank you. Kristen, were there any other questions in the Q&A that you wanted to get to before we closed?
Do we have any time left? Yeah, I just wanted to get from the top. David had a couple of questions in here. Elizabeth, I don't know if you wanted to. There was one from 401.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. David's question, has anyone compared the cost of subsidies, loans, maintenance, rehabilitation with affordable rents and waiving of property taxes and fees, and the private landlord paying all of the above costs? Because I'm sure the cost would be higher if the QMP would $1,000 monthly stipend to a tenant household. Josh, I see you, or Asen.
I can answer that. So you'd really have to look at who the actual benefit is actually going to end up going to. In some cases, rental assistance has been shown to have a really powerful impact on helping to stop displacement. I mean, obviously we saw that a little bit as part of the ERAP program recently as part of the COVID-19 response, and especially the dollars that came out of the CARES Act and the ARP Act. Actually, in a lot of cities, sort of targeted rental assistance is actually one of the things that folks consider, especially when you're dealing with sort of these displacement events like mass evictions or large rent increases, that sort of thing. The reason why this program or COPA really creates a long-term saving versus sort of one-time rental assistance is that it creates permanent affordability and helps to preserve the properties over the long term. And that creates affordability year over year, as opposed to a one-time sort of assistance. A lot of the rental assistance programs, by their nature, are really short-term. And so what we're trying to do is create long-term affordability and stability for at-risk residents in San Jose.
Thank you. I just want to note that we have put the survey into the chat. We have come to the 4 4:30 mark, we have a survey and if you would be willing to fill out, to give us feedback on this this meeting. Like Kristen mentioned, we have heard a lot about the process, so we're happy to consider other ways to format these meetings to meet your needs. So I appreciate if you would put that into the chat. And then just let you know that it's 4:30 and our interpreters will be leaving, so interpretation will be ending. And I just wanted to check in with our panel. I think last week we were on, we stayed a few minutes extra to answer questions. I'm not sure if that's something that the panel wants to do again this week. We have about, I think, three hands up from people we haven't heard from yet. I see Kristen nodding her head.
I can stay a couple minutes late if people can also.
Okay. Okay, great. So I guess thank you to those people, to everyone that's come. If you have to drop off, of course, please do. Thank you for coming. Please fill out the survey and please check our website for more updates. So we'll go through the last few questions. We'll hear from Robert, Chuck, and then Marnie. So Robert, I'm going to unmute you here.
Yeah, I just want to, basically say that the American way has always been one that selects only certain people to be able to take advantage of home ownership, land ownership. And if we want to continue the American way, then we have to continue bringing back things like redlining and other forms of discrimination, because you know what, after all, that has been the American way. And so either we're going to make a change to how we're going to do things, or we're going to go back to the way things were and bring back, take away the right to vote from certain people and other things that have discriminated against different people. It's just ridiculous that people feel that that's the American way. That's it.
Thank you, Robert. Thank you for your comments. Chuck, I'm going to go ahead and unmute you. I think you have to unmute yourself too.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes.
All right, thanks. I just joined a few minutes ago, and somebody else may have brought this up already, and if so, I apologize and also would like to endorse the idea that COPA is beneficial for owners because it enlarges the pool of possible buyers. More people will be informed about it. More people will have the opportunity to make bids. The fact that somebody makes a bid to the owner gives the owner the opportunity to demand a higher bid from the next person who is interested. It's really win-win. To me, the main thing is to maintain the stock of low-cost housing. We're losing it. We're gentrifying. It's all getting more expensive. So allowing people who live in the building or are a nonprofit interested in maintaining the building, these are good things. And like I say, the idea of more people knowing about it, more people having the opportunity to bid on it and make offers is beneficial to the owner. I'm very much in favor of people owning, where they work and where they live and running our own lives. We can do a much better job, I think, or at least learn what we need to learn to do a better job if we have a say in how things are done in regard to our housing, our work, and our living. Thank you very much.
Appreciate that. Thank you. Okay, I'm going to unmute Marnie.
Hi, so I'm wondering, so there's, to the best of my knowledge, there's TOPA in San Francisco, and I haven't really been able to find any information about that. There's DOPA in Washington, DC, and DOPA, you can find things. For instance, I'm looking online right now, and this is from June 15th, 2021. DC Council acts to fix DOPA, an affordable housing program that hasn't worked since its inception in 2008. So I am wondering what metrics you have where you have looked at TOPA and DOPA, which have been around for a while, and measured their success and learned from their failures. What have you done? And do you have any sort of papers on that? So instead of, that you could share with me, you have my email address. I'd really like to know more about how this is working in other places.
Yeah, I can take this one, Elizabeth. Thank you so much for that question, Marnie. Actually, we spent a decent amount of time to the folks in San Francisco and the folks in DC who have these programs in place to really try and understand, what are the ways that we can craft this program in a way that's a lot more successful. To answer your question directly, the program in San Francisco is the Community Opportunity to Purchase. It's COPA. It's actually a lot closer to the one that we're looking at the moment. And what we've seen since the adoption of COPA, and it went into effect in late 2019, and again, obviously that was pandemic and impacted, it's that it's helped bring a few properties into nonprofit ownership. But what I'm really hearing from the San Francisco nonprofit is that they want to see more participation from property owners and from tenants to make sure that opportunities for purchase go through the COPA process and that there is financing available. And that's one of the things that we really learned from San Francisco is having a really strong base of qualified nonprofits and making sure that there is a really robust amount of funding from city government to make sure that there is sort of a backing for it. Now for DC, you're I think describing is the district opportunity to purchase, which is slightly different from the tenant opportunity to purchase. The two programs are essentially the same and they're very, very related. But what DOPA does is actually gives the district that is the government, the city government of our nation's capital. It gives the district the opportunity to purchase the properties directly, right? And so it is essentially the government buying the properties when they come up for sale. My understanding is that DOPA has been less popular and less successful than TOPA. TOPA gives the tenants and potential nonprofits the ability to purchase their properties. And since the district started putting in some pretty significant amount of funding for it, up to $25 million a year, they've been able to take 1,500 properties off the market in 6 years. And my understanding is that program is actually scaling up now in the next decade. But you're correct in saying that for DOPA, the district opportunity to purchase, my understanding is that that's been a lot rockier. What we can do is we can share sort of the research studies that we are referencing here, and that you can get a better understanding. And we're also always open to chat to go into the details a little bit more.
I don't know, can you still hear me?
Yes.
Okay, I really would appreciate seeing that research, and I just shared with you in chat or wherever I shared it, the article on DOPA. And what about San Francisco? Is there for TOPA? You're saying it's COPA in San Francisco and DOPA. Sorry. TOPA in DC. Do you have? I mean, if you're talking about 1,500 purchases in, I'm sorry, my husband interrupted me, so I wasn't paying 6 years. But you're talking about 1,000 a year in San Jose is your goal?
So just want to reiterate, so 1,000 a year is the goal in San Francisco.
Oh, okay.
And I want to put some of these things in scale. At the time that COPA really scaled up in DC, the district I think had a population around 650,000 people, which is about obviously 60% of our population here. Even though San Francisco had a bit of a boom in the last decade, it is still only around 800,000, 850,000 folks up there. And so we're a lot bigger of a city, but weirdly enough, we actually have a lower percentage of our housing stock that is multifamily. And so we most likely will have fewer opportunities for acquisitions on a per year basis. And also because we're scaling up, we're going to need to figure out exactly how much subsidy is going to be required to be able to do these purchases. So we're still working on figuring out exactly what the scale of the program is going to be. But what we're going to want to do is to be strategic about where the acquisitions are going to be, because what we want to do as much as possible is look into the areas where displacement is happening and not just sort of buy properties willy-nilly. We really want to be targeting the places where we think we're going to be able to do the greatest good, right, with public resources.
Thanks, Jason. And Marnie, we do have your email from registration, so we'll be sure to get that information over to you.
Thank you.
Okay, looks like Sandy, you have your hand up. I'm not sure if that's remaining or if you have one last thing you'd like to share.
Oh, no, that's from before. Thanks.
Oh, okay. All right. All right. Looks like we've gone through all our questions. I want to thank everybody again for making the time to come here and helping advance the thinking on this program. I just want to give any staff the opportunity to say anything before we close out.
So many good questions. I appreciate people engaging. Especially the folks who are really thinking through these issues and trying to understand what it means. And really happy to think through, like David Eisbach's questions about what is a good use of public money. Those are great kinds of questions that we really are happy to think through together for you, and really understanding what the structures of the transactions are like and all of those things. Happy to go through more of the background with people who are interested. And we also appreciate folks helping us try to make this a productive learning experience that is focused on some facts as we try to get through this detailed thing that some of us have been working on with lots of nuances for many months. So thank you for sharing with us your thoughts and your opinions today. We really appreciate it. And then I think Elizabeth's going to be going through what our next steps are.
Yep. Jason, did you unmute yourself? Did you?
Oh yeah, just really quickly, I just want to say I really appreciate everyone's questions. As Kristen said, it's always illuminating to really hear from folks, and especially if you're encountering it for the first time, you're looking at it with fresh eyes, and for us, it's always helpful to help understand what we need to address in the future.
Exactly. Yes. And yeah, you are all giving up valuable time to be with us, so we very much appreciate it, all of your questions. So here are some next steps. We're going to be giving you all a break for the holidays, and then we'll be coming back and doing a few more public meetings in a similar format. We may adjust based on your feedback, but that will happen in January and February. We will be having potentially one, maybe two more in-person events. We are working on scheduling one in January that will be in Vietnamese with English translation. And then as you can see, the rest of the schedule there is tentative in terms of going to committees and to council. And again, you can check our website for updates on all of these items. So thank you again for being here. We can drop the link again to the survey. Really appreciate everybody's time today, and hope you have a good night and happy holidays.
Happy holidays, everyone. Thank you.